Right now, we're getting ready to go into the 2013 legislative session. The mic broke already. We're getting ready to go into the Carlson, you don't need me to be on the mic, do you?
Nah, I don't. I'm good.
My comments will still be recorded?
They sure will.
Good. We're getting ready to go into 2013 legislative session. And with that being said, some of the issues that came up last year have been the gambling issue, the gaming issue, and the idea of, and I want to get some of your feedback on some of these issues that are going to still continue to shape up this year. Last year they didn't play all the way out, but the gambling issue was a big one with destination resorts, and that's the idea that certain entities could come in Broward or Dade County, up to 3. They were going to create a new commission called the Department of Gaming Control, which would allow, this new agency would allow these 3 destination resorts, up to 3. No more than 3, up to 3, but they have to do at least a $2 billion investment, and there was all types of monies attached to it. In order for this facility, it had to be a certain square footage, and only 10% of that would be able to be used for gambling. A lot of people felt that it would put other businesses in the area out of business. Here in Palm Beach County, and it was for the pari-mutuels, in Broward, they were allowed to do slot machines because of legislation that passed and that had passed previously. Now here in Palm Beach County, we just voted to allow slot machines, which means that our pari-mutuel, which is the dog track, the one we have here in the county, there's a potential that it could be eligible if they bring this if they bring this legislation back. There's also the idea with internet casinos, internet cafes, which they call casinos, and the idea is that they're allowed under the sweepstakes law, which means as long as you're not getting a cash reward, you're able to go there and play the games. It's a loophole in the law, and the legislature was looking at that last year to try to see what they could do. I don't think they're going to be taken away, but they're going to try to come up with a way to regulate. Also, we talk about the Seminole Indian Compact, and what that is a few years ago, the compact was signed with the Seminole tribe that allows them to do card tables at their casinos. It's $1 billion over the life of that compact, and I think it's $233 million a year that goes into the state budget from that compact, and that's going to be reviewed because the state's also trying to figure out a way. If the Seminoles are getting that type of money with gambling, the state wants to get a piece of that. We also know about this year, we had a big issue with the elections. And now, of course, after the election of, after the recent election of the president, now they want to revisit the idea of early voting and trying to change some of the rules that would allow everybody to have an opportunity to vote, because so many people ended up standing in line for hours and not having the opportunity to vote. And as a measure of convenience, in the next 2 years, the big election will be for governor and midterms. We're hopeful that in 2 years that elections reform will take place. As you know, some people will be up for re-election. I'll be up for re-election. Our governor will be up for re-election. And some of the members of the U.S. Congress House. With that being said, I know right now already, I can tell you that some people have already filed bills. On the Senate side, Senator Joyner, who's one of the senior members, and she's the head of the Florida Caucus of Black State Legislators. She has filed a bill that would expand early voting sites and expand the number of hours on the weekend to 12, and will allow the ability to change the address at the polling station. And as you know, our supervisor of elections is also fighting for the same thing. Susan Booker, who is a former state representative, is also trying to get some more locations for early voting. So that's one of the laws, one of the pieces of legislation that's up. Now, we aren't in session, so nothing has been worked through any committees, nothing has hit the floor, but these are things that are being proposed. And I'll visit you after session to tell you how it turns out. Senator Diaz de la Portilla, he wants to extend early voting sites to 10 days and expand the polling locations to no more than 14 hours. And then there's Representative Darrell Rousson, who is also trying to remove the provisions of third-party voter registration, and he wants to also expand the early voting sites. So the elections reform is something that's up in the air. Also, House Speaker Will Weatherford and Senator Don Gates, who is the Senate President, have also said elections reform and ethics are two of the things that they're really going to be focused on this year. So we're hopeful that they really work on that. Another thing that's coming through the state legislature is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And every day there's something new in the newspaper about it. The most recent thing is our governor said that it would cost the state $26 billion over the next 10 years. And after a study that's come back and the numbers have been reworked, it looks like over the next 10 years with everything involved, it would probably cost the state about $3 billion. And as you know, $26 billion and $3 billion over the next 10 years is a huge difference. But it allows people, I think up to 100,000 people to be able to have health care through Medicaid, which would keep people out of the emergency room, which could save us money on the front end as opposed to the back end. A big thing that's going to be happening right now, and everybody's jumping on it, it's a hot topic, is gun violence. And I'll tell you, in the legislature, in the state legislature, Florida legislature, there's been a huge push to kind of make it easier for people to obtain weapons, concealed weapons. This year Florida, we hit 1 million. We gave out 1 million concealed weapons permits in the state of Florida. And from what I read, that's 1 in every 14 people in the state has a concealed weapon. The problem with that is we're the state with the most concealed weapons permits out there. So now it's just about everyone who has a gun. And I believe in the Second Amendment and people should have the right to bear arms, but also we have to look at this idea of where people are taking their guns and the type of ammunition that's available and the type of weapons that people are allowed to purchase. Some weapons people shouldn't be allowed to purchase now. There's been a huge effort for people to stay away from that because, you know, we have the NRA who is heavily involved in the legislature, and those are, generally speaking, some of the pieces of legislation that are affecting our community. And when I bring that up to let you know that if you've read the Palm Beach Post, and my office has been fielding calls for the last couple of days from a number of media sources about the bill that I recently filed, which is House Bill 97. And I have a copy of the bill here, but basically House Bill 97 kind of gives there was an exemption passed in 2011 that allows people to carry their concealed weapon pretty much anywhere they want to take it. Well, what this would do is it would add an extra layer of protection. House Bill 97 would throw the onus back onto local governments to say whether you can or just not to allow people to come into sporting events or publicly sponsored events or places with their weapons. And basically what it says here is a state agency or local government would be exempt from prohibiting a person who's licensed to carry a concealed weapon or firearm or ammunition at a publicly sponsored or sanctioned recreation event, concert, or sporting event conducted in a public building or at a government-sponsored outdoor public venue. And that would go for libraries. Anywhere we have a group of people gathered at, like even here tonight, if someone wanted to come in with their concealed weapon, they'd obviously be allowed to do so. But with this bill, if local governments like the city of West Palm Beach say, we don't want to allow that, and the county is also fighting this because if anybody, I think the way the legislation is right now, anyone who tries to prevent this can be sued. So each individual commissioner could be sued for up to $50,000 for
trying to come up with legislation that would prevent people, or coming up with an ordinance that would overstep the state's ordinance. So it's kind of giving home rule back to the state. There's another piece of legislation that I'm filing. It's still in drafting right now, and it was filed prior to this again. It's the bill, we call it prosecution of juveniles. And what that does is, a lot of kids in our communities are directly filed into the system for different crimes. It's not saying that kids can't be directly filed into the system, but what it says now is the state attorney, and I'm going to meet with State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg at the end of the month to try to make sure this language, and hopefully it's right along the lines that he would like, and he'd be supportive, that he can get the other state attorneys on board to make sure that our kids can't be just directly filed into the system. There has to be a set of criteria to say that they meet this criteria, now I'll file them in the system, because I think Palm Beach County had one of the highest rates of direct files in the state of Florida, and it becomes a brain drain when we continuously send our kids to prison. That's when you find out, or detention, well, anytime they're incarcerated, that's when you find out, oh, this kid can draw, this kid can read, this kid's intelligent, this kid's bright, but now they're locked away and it's too late. So those are a couple of the issues that I'm working on. I just wanted to give that brief overview, and now I'm going to open the floor for questions.
There are some legislative initiatives that you know that we're on board with the League of Cities, and we do have a copy of that. But there are three particular ones in the city of West Palm Beach that my colleagues and I have decided that it is paramount priority for us. As you do know, the first one is pensions. That is number one for us, because we will be broke in the city of West Palm Beach in the next 12 years if we have to maintain the 175 and 185, which is the fire and police pension plan. The second and the third one are legislative proposals that came out of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee in the Florida League of Cities, which is chaired by one of my colleagues, James, and there are 8 members from Palm Beach County on this committee. We're putting our efforts behind finding definitions for sober houses, and 2, synthetic marijuana and bath salt. As we informed Representative Pafford the other night, President Obama has already signed an executive decree on synthetic marijuana and bath salt, and we're working with him through the National League, and we're also working through the State Attorney General here, Pam Bondi, in the state of Florida, to let Florida be the lead state in helping to get some federal legislation on it. Now, we have municipal legislation on synthetic marijuana and bath salt. We have county regulations, and we have state. We have to tweak it and make it together. But the most critical one right now that's affecting my colleague, Commissioner from Lake Park and Delray got hit with a $500,000 fine because they were stopping I'm not talking about group houses, I'm talking about sober houses, and there's a difference. And as I told you, I'm going to give you the bill, the language of the bill that Senator Bachanoff and Representative Rooney presented last year, and the only thing it does is define what a sober house is and the criteria for their being. We believe on the league in the state and the city that if this happens, we'll be able to. We're not talking about group homes that take care of the disabled and any other of the state-operated facilities. But we're talking about these cash cow runners who decide that they want to provide alcohol rehab homes and drug rehab homes, etc. And there is no state legislation or municipal legislation in place that we can stop it. Lake Park and it being inundated, every beach is at the mercy right now. And I think we've counted about 45 so far in our